On the day of their wedding, Lu Hanji's groom and Cheng Junze's bride escaped from marriage. When both families were embarrassed and became the laughing stock of the capital, Lu Hanji gritted his teeth and sat in the Cheng family's sedan chair. From then on, Lu Hanji, who had thought he would oppose the literati and talented scholars in reciting poetry before and after the moon, married into a family of generations of generals. A misunderstanding and prejudice, two exchanged marriages, have been talked about by the people of the capital for a long time, until they are together, with many children and grandchildren. Looking back on their original choices, Lu Hanji gazed at the people around him and finally said, "Fortunately, I met you." Keywords of the novel. After the groom escaped marriage, she married into the general's gate without a pop-up window. After the groom escaped marriage, she married into the general's gate. Download the complete text of the book. After the groom escaped marriage, she married into the general's gate. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Newly married. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Newly married. Girl, take off the jewelry from your head. A group of people gathered around the new uncle and left the new house. Seeing the sweat on your own forehead, Bai Chao advised. Lu Hanji nodded slightly, not because she was reserved, but because the hairpin ring jewelry on this end made her afraid to move around. Seeing Bai Chao take off the jewelry on the head of the master, Bai He, who was standing by, also came to help and reminded, "You can't call me a girl anymore. You should call me grandma." Both Bizao and Biha have been serving Lu Hanji since childhood, and it's not customary for girls who have been shouting for years to change their tune now. Mr. Kurson is the crown prince of Ningguo, and the rules of the mansion are strict. They are new to us, so we must not cause trouble for our lord just because of these false accusations. Thinking of this marriage made Lu Hanji feel a bit dazed. The Lu family is a scholarly family. Lu Hanji's grandfather once held the position of prime minister, but now he has retired and only holds the false title of grand tutor. Lu Hanji's father also had a background in the imperial examination. 14 years ago, he passed the imperial examination and became the top scorer. Now, just after his 40s, he has become a fourth-rank official in Shuntian prefecture. The Lu family cannot be said to be prestigious, but they can also be considered a noble family in the capital. Therefore, after several years of serving as an outsider, my father brought Lu Hanji, who had just reached the age of Ji, back to Beijing, and there were never fewer families who came to propose marriage. The Lu family is a scholarly family, and those who usually walk around are also scholars. They have never thought of marrying the top Ningguo mansion in the prestigious family. Before this, their father had chosen a husband for Lu Hanji, who was originally the son of a classmate and friend, named Li Mingho. He was 18 years old and had just passed the imperial examination last year. My parents were classmates and friends, and my husband was intelligent and eager to learn. He was originally an enviable close relative, but to everyone's surprise, everything was ready. Lu Hanji even put on his wedding dress, but news came that his fiancée had eloped with someone. When he received this news, Lu Hanji couldn't explain whether he was more ashamed and angry or more aggrieved. She has been engaged to Li Mingho for over a year, and we have only seen each other 2 or 3 times. In fact, there is no romantic relationship. However, on the day of their wedding, her fiancé eloped with others, but instead threw the faces of Lu Hanji and the Lu family on the ground. Lu Hanji remembered in a joke from his past life how much face was worth, but now he truly felt that the face thrown on the ground was heavier than 1,000 gold coins, making it difficult for him to breathe. Therefore, when the Ningguo mansion, which had lost his bride, came to propose marriage, Lu Hanji did not hesitate and answered in one fell swoop. She didn't know how Prince Ningguo was, but she had already seen through Li Mingho's ruthlessness and lack of responsibility. Instead of guarding the Li family with no hope, she would rather take a gamble. Although there was no intersection before, Cheng Junze, the crown prince of Ningguo, and Lu Hanji had heard of it. The Duke of Ningguo was a founding hero who inherited the hereditary position of duke. Even though the Cheng family had already handed over military power, no one dared to underestimate it. Moreover, Cheng Junze's eldest sister married into the Eastern Palace, which is now the crown princess of the Eastern Palace. If we say that the family background of the Lu family can be considered higher than that of the Cheng family. It was precisely for this reason that when Lu Hanzhi got off the wedding and stepped onto the bridal sedan chair, her mother earnestly reminded her to abide by her duties at her husband's house, win the favor of her husband's family, not to support the Lu family, but to hope that she could be safe and prosperous in the Cheng family. The Cheng family is illustrious. The girl who was previously betrothed to the crown prince was a girl from the Zhou family, a marquis of Pingnan. The Cheng family is close friends with the Zhou family, and it is said that they had already arranged a marriage between their children. When the Zhou family girl and her husband arrived, they discussed getting married. Coincidentally, their marriage date was set on the same day as the Lu family. However, today is really a good day. Lu Hanzhi sat in a sedan chair and encountered several welcoming teams along the way. In a moment of confusion, the door of the new house was knocked on, and the person outside said, "Grandma, the old lady has instructed me to bring some food over." Due to the special circumstances, Lu Hanzhi had never inquired about the situation of the Ningguo mansion before, and the people of the mansion only saw the female relatives of the mansion at various banquets in the capital. Mr. Lu Hanzhi, an old man from the Cheng family, has also seen her twice. In his impression, she is a gentle and kind old lady. When he heard that the old lady had someone bring her food, Lu Hanzhi looked at the green grass. The green grass understood and opened the door, leading the person in. The little maid who was delivering things looked only 13 or 14 years old, respectful and polite, and didn't dare to look around the room. She put down the food box, took out the contents one by one, and then bowed to Lu Hanzhi, saying, "The old lady said it's busy today, and there's no time to ask Granny about her preferences. Please taste it first. If there's anything that doesn't fit, instruct the maid to go and pick it up separately." Lu Hanzhi looked at the food on the table. There were 2 dishes, 1 soup and dim sum. The staple food also included rice and delicate xiaolongbao. It was not extravagant, but she was completely enough alone. She then said, "It's very good. Please thank the old lady for me." The little maid dared not dare to speak, and Lu Hanzhi said there was no problem. She didn't stay here too long, and after being blessed, she withdrew. She didn't lie. Today, the crown prince's wedding, the mansion was busy, and she wished she could be 2 people. She brought food to this place and had to go back to the old man's place to work. Lu Hanzhi had a tumultuous day, not to mention the custom that the bride didn't have a few bites to eat on the day of their wedding. After all the trouble, she really didn't have much appetite to eat. At present, all the dust has settled down. Although life in the future still needs to be seen slowly, overall, the government still values her. Lu Hanzhi's tense mind has relaxed, and he does feel hungry. He was careful. Seeing Lu Hanzhi sitting down, she filled her with a bowl of lily broth of white fungus and handed it to her. First, Grandma moistens her throat. Lu Hanzhi nodded, took the bowl, and slowly drank half of it before using his chopsticks to eat. Although the Lu family was originally from Ezhou and had traveled to many places with their father, their food has always been more flavorful, unlike the light and exquisite cuisine of the government. That said, Lu Hanzhi likes spicy food and sweet food. Lu Hanzhi likes the sweet broth of white fungus. After drinking a bowl of it, he still wants it, but Biha stops him and says, "Granny, this soup is not very hungry." Lu Hanzhi did not insist, nor did he pick up the food he sent. He had eaten some and was almost full. Seeing that there was still a lot left on the table, he said to the 2 of them, "You 2 have been running with me all day. You can share the rest and make a cushion first." Of course, the Duke's mansion would not starve them, but for those who have just arrived, they have a black eye on this mansion and can only wait for it to be delivered. The 2 of them, Bai Chao, have been serving Lu Hanzhi for many years. Upon hearing Lu Hanzhi's words, they agreed, but they couldn't do without people here. The two of them took turns going. After a long time, Lu Hanji didn't know the time and felt that she was almost asleep before hearing the outside shout, "The Crown Prince is back." End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Urgent Call. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Urgent Call. This shout completely woke up Lu Hanji, and by chow and by he hurriedly tidied up Lu Hanji's clothes and hair. Cheng Junze walked into the new house and saw the bride sitting upright on the bed. Lu Hanji has changed into lightweight clothes, still wearing a bright red dress. However, compared to the exquisitely embroidered wedding dress, the current dress is more concise, with only simple patterns embroidered on the collar and cuffs. The hairpin ring on his head has been removed, and his hair is simply tied up with a headband. Compared to the bright red makeup when he removed the cover, Lu Hanji now adds a touch of elegance and softness, but his stunning face remains unchanged. When Cheng Junze looked at Lu Hanji was also looking at him. This newlywed husband, Lu Hanji, had only seen him for the first time when he lifted his hat. Compared to Li Mingho, who was somewhat thin, Cheng Junze, although he looked the same thin and tall figure, could feel a sense of strength as a martial arts practitioner. Lu Hanji once heard that Cheng Junze grew up in the border, even less than the weak crown of Cheng Junze. He was already a well-known general in the border, but if he only looked at others, he also had a refined aura. Lu Hanji thought that the Confucian generals he heard before were probably like this. Cheng Junze grew up in the border and mostly interacted with border soldiers. In fact, he didn't know how to get along with women. When Lu Hanji looked at him openly, Cheng Junze felt a bit uneasy and refused to show his timidity in front of his newlywed wife. He looked directly at Lu Hanji and arched his hand, saying, "Madam, you've been waiting for so long." Lu Hanji didn't expect Cheng Junze to say this, maintaining a gentle image of a scholarly family and saying, "It's the hard work of my husband to entertain guests. How can I blame my husband?" The newlywed couple spoke so politely that even the Bai Chao and others who were following couldn't stand still. They were about to leave, leaving the two masters to chat slowly when suddenly they heard someone outside say, "Crown Prince, the border is urgent." The emperor announces the crown prince to enter the palace. After marrying into the Cheng family, Lu Hanji knew he had to face his husband's expedition, but he never expected to encounter him so soon. Upon hearing these words, Cheng Junze fell silent for a moment, with a guilty expression on his face. "Sorry, The border matter is important, my husband, let's go to the palace first." Lu Hanji is not an unreasonable person. If he were to make a fuss about not being allowed to go at this time, it would be too unreasonable. The emperor summoned him, but the government dared not neglect him. Although Lu Hanji was a newlywed bride, he personally escorted Cheng Junze out. Only by walking ahead did they realize that not only did they travel to Junze, but Duke Ningguo also received a summons, and the father and son left the door together. Lady Zheng, the wife of the Duke of China, couldn't help but feel some heartache when she saw her daughter-in-law delivered to the door and said, "I've wronged you." Lu Hanji bowed and said, "Border matters matter, my daughter-in-law won't be wronged." Zheng's impression of Lu Hanji was actually still limited to his appearance. When Lu Hanji returned to Beijing with his parents, the saying that the second daughter of the Lu family had a stunning appearance came out. Lord Lu has a bright future, his daughter is beautiful, and the Lu family is well known for its clean and noble family. At that time, many people came to propose marriage, but the eldest son has already been engaged. Zheng Shi has seen Lu Hanji twice and did not pay much attention. Now that Lu Hanji has become his daughter-in-law by chance, Zheng Shi actually has some doubts, but now seeing her courteous and gentle temperament, she feels a bit relieved. Thinking of her husband and eldest son being urgently summoned to the palace, as well as the urgent situation at the border, I am afraid that they will soon go on a military expedition. I have some sympathy for this newly passed daughter-in-law and said, "This kind of thing, I'm afraid this discussion will last all night. You've been tired all day today, so don't wait for the eldest brother. Go back and rest earlier. Lu Hanji had just married and had always listened to his mother-in-law in everything. Upon hearing her say, he nodded in agreement and then resigned from Zheng's position before returning. It was already late at this time, and most of the guests, except for the relatives of the Cheng family who lived in the mansion, had already resigned. The steward was leading the servants to tidy up the yard, and when they met Lu Hanji, they all called him Granny. It has just entered February, and the weather is still cold. Zheng urged landing Hanji to go back and rest. The mother-in-law and daughter-in-law separated at the gate of the courtyard, and the new house is located in Chengyuan, which is far away. It took about a cup of tea when they arrived, and it seemed like they had walked longer when they returned. Lu Hanji felt a bit tired, but when he first arrived at a place, even if he couldn't remember the road, he had to remember a few iconic buildings. When he saw that he was passing through unfamiliar places, Lu Hanji stopped and looked at the maid who was leading the way, saying, "Where do you want to take me?" The little maid who led the way stiffened and said, "Of course it's back to Chengyuan." Lu Hanji looked up and glanced at the yard not far away. She didn't have an unforgettable memory, but she had some impressions of what she had seen. Moreover, Chengyuan is the residence of the crown prince, with a large area and exquisite architecture. However, this place looks quiet and elegant, more like the residence of a young girl in the boudoir. Lu Hanji is not familiar with the duke's mansion, but no matter what he thinks, the crown prince will not live here. Do you think if I shout out, will I invite all the masters of the mansion? Lu Hanji looked at the little maid and couldn't guess what she wanted to do for a moment, but she had just passed the door. Her husband was not there at night, and she was a newlywed running around the mansion. Whether someone saw her or something, it was not a good thing. In the evening, Lu Han let out a scream, and the little maid covered her mouth. The picture was too beautiful to imagine. She couldn't figure it out. If someone else encountered such a situation, even if they noticed it, they would quietly cover it up and beg her to take it back. If someone else found out, wouldn't it attract gossip? It's just that Lu Hanji is the master. If someone is really recruited, regardless of whether others believe it or not, she, the maid leading the way, cannot escape punishment and even lost her life. Who would call her a servant? Yes, it's because the servant was confused and remembered the wrong way for a while, so I'll take grandma back. I dare not expose this matter to the public. Even if I brought Lu Hanji here, I just wanted her to meet someone. She's just a little maid trying to make some money, how dare she harm the master? Lu Hanji looked around and saw a pavilion not far away. He wrote a letter to Cherish the Moon Pavilion, secretly keeping his heart in mind that it was not time to investigate. Being seen through by Lu Hanji, the little maid dared not play tricks anymore and honestly sent him back. Just as she was about to retreat, she only listened to Lu Hanji's words, "What's your name?" The little maid shrank her body, knowing that she had already hung up in front of the old lady. She whispered, Chunying, my servant. Spring Warbler. Lu Hanji repeated, "It's a good name." "I'm sorry, I'm leaving." Chunying didn't know if Lu Hanji would hold grudges or do anything to her in the future, but for now, she just wanted to leave quickly. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Junze. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Junze. Lu Hanji did not make things difficult for her and let her go. The gate of Chengyuan was open, and Biha waited in front of the door with a lantern in hand, her face full of anxiety. She met Lu Hanji and said, "Why has grandma been away for so long?" She then glared at Bitsao and said, "It's late at night, why don't you advise grandma to come back earlier?" "Don't blame the green grass." Lu Hanji shook his head and briefly mentioned the matter of the spring warbler. "The green grass has only just arrived, where do you know the way?" Biha also knew that it was not Bitsao's fault. It was only her own master who married into the Ningguo mansion. If nothing happened and people saw her wandering around in the mansion at night, she didn't know how to arrange it. Feeling angry in his heart, he couldn't help but say, "What does the Duke's mansion mean?" "It's the girl from another Duke's mansion who came to beg, not us clinging to them with shameless eyes." It may not necessarily be the meaning of the government. Lu Hanji was not so angry. She had only just married into the Ningguo mansion, and the master of the mansion had already met her husband and in-laws. Cheng Junze had met her for the first time, and although he was particularly polite, he should not have been dissatisfied. In-laws were also very sorry for Cheng Junze's temporary removal by the imperial decree, and it was unlikely that he would make things difficult for her or even frame her at this time. But Biha was not at ease. They had just arrived in this mansion, and it could be said that their eyes were black. This time they managed to avoid it, but next time, Grandma shouldn't have let that girl go. She is the maid of the mansion, where can she go? Lu Hanji was not in a hurry about this. Since I have married, this is my own family. These things cannot be confused, but they are not in a hurry. By Chow, by he, starting tomorrow, you will gradually become familiar with the people and things in the mansion. Pay attention to where the spring warbler is from, who she is close to, and the layout of the mansion. Just now, I took a closer look. There is a Sia pavilion next to it. Please take a closer look and see where it is. Bai Chao and Bai He both agreed. It was too late today, and Lady Gua advised Lu Hanji to rest earlier. The two of them then served Lu Hanji to sleep. Around the whole day, Lu Han encountered many things. When he first arrived at the Cheng family, he slept soundly. When he woke up, it was already dawn. The room was lit with dragon and phoenix candles, and it was not yet dawn. However, there was no problem seeing things through the candles. Lu Hanji turned to his side and saw a person sitting at the table under the window. Lu Hanji was stunned by fear before realizing that he had married yesterday. Looking at his face again, it was indeed her newlywed husband. Cheng Junze had just arrived home not long ago, and a chill was emanating from outside. He didn't disturb Lu Hanji either, so he sat at the table and heated the fire, thinking about how to tell him about his upcoming expedition. Cheng Junze is not very old, but he grew up in the border area since childhood. Such things cannot be said to be common, but he is not afraid. The Cheng family enjoys high officials and rich salaries, so they take on the responsibility of guarding the border. However, this time it is different. Yesterday, when he paid respects to heaven and earth, he knew that he not only had to take on the responsibility of guarding the border, but also had to take on the responsibility of his wife and future children. Lu Hanji slept very well. Under the bright red brocade quilt, the woman's face was peaceful and beautiful, like a finely crafted jade figure that anyone wanted to hold in their palm. Cheng Junze had to admit that his first good impression of Lu Hanji was his stunning appearance, followed by his gentle and peaceful nature. However, even with his good temperament, it may be difficult to accept the news that his newlywed husband is about to go to the border. Just as he was lost in thought, he realized that Lu Hanji had woken up. Cheng Junze instinctively wanted to retract his gaze and saw the startled and suddenly enlightened appearance of Lu Hanji. He couldn't help but chuckle softly. Lu Hanji regained his senses and heard Cheng Junze's light smile, which made his face warm. He said, "When did the crown prince come back? Why didn't he call me up?" Cheng Junze saw that Lu Hanji was about to get up and quickly turned his back, saying, "Not long after I came back, you get up first, I'll wait for you outside. I have something to say to you." From the awkward pleasantries last night, Lu Hanji could tell that Cheng Junze, a young general, was relatively naive in matters of male and female relationships. Lu Hanji also had little experience, but after all, there was an explosion of information in his past life, no practical experience, and theoretical knowledge was still available. Seeing Cheng Junze hurriedly walking out, he couldn't help but chuckle softly. Cheng Junze has been practicing martial arts since childhood, and Lu Hanji's undisguised laughter couldn't be heard. He couldn't help but feel regretful. This is his daughter. What can't he see? Unfortunately, his reaction is faster than his brain, and he has been walking outside for a moment. He can't turn back, can he? Upon hearing the commotion inside, Bai Chao and Bai He entered the room to serve Lu Hanji's grooming. Both of them have always served Lu Hanji, skillfully washing, dressing, and grooming him. Once they have finished tidying up here, breakfast is also served. Lu Hanji walked to the table outside, and Cheng Junze adjusted his mood and sat down. When he saw Lu Hanji coming, he asked her to sit down and said, "Today is not enough time to ask about your preferences. In the future, if you like anything, you can order the small kitchen to do it. If anything is missing, just let someone go to the big kitchen to ask for it." Lu Hanji didn't expect Cheng Junze to mention this as soon as he arrived, so he couldn't help but say, "There are different rules for food in the mansion. Besides, it's probably not appropriate to go there." Cheng Junze never thought about this issue. He spent more time at the border since he was young, and when he returned to his mansion, his grandmother and mother always held on to him, fearing that he would be wronged. Cheng Junze is accustomed to the simple life at the border, and his best impression of the capital city is probably the small kitchen in Chengyuan. His mother has chosen the best cook, and whatever he wants to eat, just mention it, the next meal will definitely appear on the table. Cheng Junze has never encountered this problem, but he is already smart. Thinking about Lu Hanji's recent marriage and being a junior, it is inevitable that this will attract people to gossip, or that they will come up with rules and principles that are usually annoying. He nodded and said, "This is also easy to handle. Just let people buy it directly. We can buy it ourselves with our own money, and no one will say anything." As he said, he handed a key to Lu Hanji. This is. Lu Hanji didn't even consider becoming a trusted daughter-in-law in the Cheng family. He just got married and didn't know much about the affairs in the mansion, so he naturally had to observe and familiarize himself. However, he didn't expect Cheng Junze to say so. Seeing the key he handed over, he was somewhat surprised and didn't reach out to take it. Cheng Junze handed the key directly to Lu Hanji and said, "This is the key to my private treasury. My wealth is already in it. Madam, please take good care of it for me." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Farewell. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Farewell. The customs and rules of the Cheng family are unknown to Lu Hanji, but most wealthy families are similar. Before the separation, the salary of the men in the family must be transferred to the public, and they should receive monthly payment. The dowry of the daughter-in-law is their own private property and can be kept and used by themselves. Of course, food, clothing, and expenses are distributed by the public. If you want more, you have to think of a solution on your own. Of course, the salary needs to be paid, and adult men in the family will have some private property, including red envelopes from childhood to adulthood, various items gifted by elders, such as Cheng Junze, and rewards of various sizes for leading troops in battle. Lu Hanji's dowry is quite substantial. Although the Lu family is of a noble family, several generations have been in the officialdom, and there have been no black sheep in the family. After several generations of accumulation, the family's wealth is still very rich. His parents love Lu Hanji, not to mention spending all their money to marry him, but this dowry is only enviable by the legitimate daughters of many noble families. But his own money was not the same as what his husband had submitted. Lu Hanji was surprised for a moment and said, "My husband usually walks outside and inevitably needs silver. I don't need much at the border. If I were in the capital, I would just ask my wife. On the contrary, when my wife is new here, she always needs money in her hands to act conveniently." Cheng Junze himself didn't spend much time in the capital, but he heard that many people in the capital have a pair of snobbish eyes, and without money, it would be difficult to move a step. Besides, there are many places for women to spend money. When Cheng Junze saw the emerald bracelet on Lu Hanji's wrist and the swaying steps on his head, it was all silver. Taking advantage of Lu Han's positive emotions, Cheng Junze cautiously said, "Madam, I'm going on a military expedition today." Lu Hanji's hand, holding the key, paused for a moment. Last night, he summoned Duke Ning and Cheng Junze into the palace for a discussion, and Lu Hanji guessed a few points. The border war was likely to be urgent and could not be delayed. It didn't seem surprising that Cheng Junze was about to embark on an expedition immediately. It is impossible to say that one is happy. Cheng Junze did not come here for promotion or salary increase. The war at the border could be fatal at any time. Even as a general, there is no 100% safety. Today we're leaving, when will we set off? Lu Hanji adjusted his emotions. Cheng Junze is a general and cannot disobey the emperor's orders, let alone ignore the border people. Yes, go to the northwest. No, Cheng Junze was actually a little worried about Lu Hanji crying. When he and his father left Beijing at a young age, both his mother and sister would cry, and it would take a long time to stop. Lu Hanji was his wife, and he left her on his wedding night. Today, he had to leave home and go to the border. He always felt sorry for her. Suzhou urgently reported that the northern D suddenly went south to invade, and half of the city in Suzhou had already been lost. The emperor ordered me to be the vanguard and rushed to reinforce it. The military situation in Suzhou is not a secret. Outsiders cannot know so well, but they will also know where the war occurred, and there is nothing to say at home. The Qing family has been stationed in the northwest for generations, so Lu Han subconsciously thought that this time there was also a war in the northwest. Unexpectedly, it was actually Suzhou. After pondering for a moment, Lu Han said, "I have been to Suzhou before. The founding of the Great Chu dynasty has been over 100 years, and it has always attached great importance to the imperial examination. However, not every successful candidate in the imperial examination can achieve success, even the top scorer in high school." At this age, Lu Yun, the father of Lu Hanji, was able to become the magistrate of Shuntian Prefecture. In addition to his grandfather's network, Lu Yun was more likely to have been away for many years and accumulated tangible political achievements. My father was exiled, and both Lu Hanji and his second brother followed my parents. Although they were not as wealthy as those in Beijing, they also gained a lot of knowledge. My father once served as the governor of Suzhou for a period of time, and our family went with him to Suzhou. Although I didn't understand politics, I once heard my father and second brother say that Suzhou was adjacent to Beidi, and there were records of Beidi's invasion every year in the archives. However, the city defense was not very tight, and it was rare that no people died at the hands of Beidi every year. Lu Hanji recalled the situation at that time. At that time, my second brother said, "Since the garrison in Suzhou can protect the people of Suzhou and no one dies at the hands of Beidi, why can't we protect the property of the people of Suzhou?" My second brother was not very old at that time, and his words were a bit childish. But when we arrived in Suzhou, it was winter, and people froze to death or starved to death every day. The total number added up was no less than the number of people who died from the invasion of the Rong and Di tribes in other states and counties. Lu Hanji still couldn't help but sigh now, but my father only stayed in Suzhou for less than half a year, and before he had time to learn more, he was transferred to another place. Lu Hanji only mentioned Suzhou and remembered the situation at that time, but Cheng Junze thought more. He has never been to Suzhou, but he knows that Suzhou is just like the northwest border prefecture, and even the weather is bitter and cold, making the lives of the people even more difficult. The meager property of ordinary people is their survival support. How could they let the enemy take it? Since that's the case, how could there be no casualties under the invasion of Beidi? There may be another reason for this. Thank you for telling me this, Cheng Junze sincerely thanked him. He had never been to Suzhou before, and even if he got a map, his understanding of Suzhou was very one-sided. Although Lu Hanji only mentioned this matter, it was enough to remind him that the officials and soldiers in Suzhou may not be fully trusted. Seeing that Cheng Junze had taken her words to heart, Lu Hanji was not worried about wronging the officials in Suzhou. Cheng Junze was not going to investigate those officials, but as a leading general, if someone stabbed her in the back, it would be too unfair. It would be good to be cautious. After having breakfast during their casual conversation, Cheng Junze stood up and said to Lu Hanji, "Let's go and meet our relatives together." Cheng Junze is going on a military expedition today, and Lu Hanji didn't expect him to accompany him to meet his senior relatives at this time. When he said this, he was somewhat surprised and said, "You're going on a military expedition today, don't you need to pack up? Things have their own people to tidy up, and the army will only depart in the afternoon. Coincidentally, I will accompany you to meet the relatives of the elders." Before getting married, the elders told him about the process before and after the wedding. According to the rules, he should accompany Lu Hanji to meet the relatives of the elders in the family today and accompany her back to her mother's house tomorrow to reassure her parents. Now that the imperial decree is hard to disobey, it is impossible to accompany Lu Hanji back to his mother's house tomorrow. However, today we should always accompany her to offer tea to our elders. His respect and love are the foundation for Lu Hanji to establish himself in the Cheng family. Okay. Lu Hanji only felt that her liking for Cheng Junze was rapidly increasing. Of course, she knew that Cheng Junze would accompany her to serve tea, and her future life would be much better. However, she would not make such a request when Cheng Junze was about to go on a mission. But if Cheng Junze could think of it himself and accompany her to do it, Lu Hanji felt that his choice was not wrong. Even if Cheng Junze didn't have a deep affection for her, at least he had a sense of responsibility, rather than just thinking about himself. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Journey. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Journey. Because Cheng Junze is about to go on a military expedition, the tea ceremony is also simple. The old lady of the Duke of Ninggua's mansion is still there, a gentle and kind old man. Lady of the Duke of Ningguo, Lu Hanji, has already met her and is a dignified and elegant lady. On the other hand, Duke of Ningguo is sitting upright for the first time, wanting to show some gentleness. However, she has become accustomed to seriousness and looks somewhat awkward. Lu Hanji bowed to the elders, received a bunch of gifts, and then met the younger generation. With the gift, the ceremony was considered complete. Mrs. Cheng was satisfied when she saw Lu Hanji standing with her grandson. She nodded and said, "Let's set off in the afternoon and have a reunion dinner before we leave." "Don't worry, mother. My daughter-in-law arranged everything early in the morning, and all the meals were prepared." Zheng heard that Cheng Junze was going on a military expedition this morning, so she ordered lunch to be prepared in advance. She thought that Lu Hanji had just married and Cheng Junze was going on a military expedition again, so we all had to have a reunion dinner together. "Then let's set up the meal." Mrs. Cheng nodded. Although it was not yet time for lunch, the departure time of the army had already been set, so having breakfast would avoid being rushed. Madam Cheng spoke, and everyone changed places. The maids orderly brought up the food and were about to start the banquet when Lady Liang suddenly said, "Why don't you see Miss Lian?" Seeing old Lady Cheng frowning slightly, Cheng said, "Today is our family meeting. It's inconvenient for Lian girl to come. I have already sent someone to send food and dim sum. The same goes for Cheng and Yi girl." "You're interested," Mrs. Cheng nodded. "Just call them again in the evening. It's just that the eldest son and daughter-in-law will also meet them. They are all relatives of the same generation, so it's good to walk around together in the future." Lu Hanji only nodded and smiled. It sounded like these were all relatives and children living in the mansion, but the pitiful girl who was singled out was probably a bit special. Lu Hanji was a bit curious, but now it was not the time to ask further questions. He just secretly paid attention to this second aunt and specifically mentioned that pitiful girl at this time. It didn't seem kind no matter how he looked at it. Today, Lu Hanji paid a visit to the senior relatives of the Cheng family, and those present are all the Cheng family. Cheng Laogong had a total of 5 sons and 2 daughters under his command. Only the current Ningguo Gong and his second uncle Cheng Tianhe were legitimate descendants. After Laogong passed away, the other several houses were separated, and now only the second house remains in the mansion. Of course, today the bride is offering tea, and the 3 uncles have also come with their families. Now they are all staying to have a family banquet. It is not appropriate to call relatives with different surnames for such an occasion, which is also why Jing arranged it this way. Liang mentioned that after hearing what Mrs. Cheng said, she didn't mention this matter anymore. She passed the meal safely and steadily, and the time for Cheng Junze to depart was approaching. Mrs. Cheng took her grandson's advice and finally let Cheng Junze go. As the newlywed wife, Lu Hanji also left with her. The two of them returned to Cheng Yuan together, and Lu Hanji casually asked, "Is the pitiful girl mentioned by aunt heir or relative of our family?" At the family banquet, the two of them didn't sit together, but Cheng Junze also heard Liang's words. He knew about Lian Mai, but he didn't understand. Today, Lu Hanji served tea and ate the family banquet at home, so it was normal not to call his relatives by their surnames. Neither of the 2 aunts came. What did the second aunt specifically mention to her? Upon hearing Lu Hanji's question, Cheng Junze casually replied, "She is my grandmother's niece and granddaughter. Her name is kind-hearted, and her parents left early. My grandmother felt sorry for her and brought her to live in the mansion." Lu Hanji nodded and then asked, "Are you very familiar with her?" Based on his intuition of growing up in the border from a young age, Cheng Junze felt that this question needed to be answered well. "You know, I grew up in the border from a young age and didn't have much time to return to Beijing. I only met the cousin of the Guo family a few times, which can be considered recognition. However, I heard that Junyao is very close to her." Junyao is my cousin. What about the other 2? Lu Hanji was quite satisfied with Cheng Junze's answer. Since he mentioned it, he could ask both of them. Cheng's younger cousin is the eldest son of his aunt. He passed the imperial examination last year and was sent to the National Academy for Education by his uncle. His mother wanted to take care of the younger generation, so she brought him to live in the mansion. Ye's younger cousin is the daughter of her aunt and has not been doing well in the Yi family. Her grandmother took the initiative to bring him over and live in the bamboo garden with Guo's younger cousin. Cheng Junze can also tell this information. When he returned to Beijing, he only saw his relatives a few times. Lu Hanji nodded to show understanding. The 2 of them returned to Cheng Yuan, and Cheng Junze's luggage had been packed. Lu Hanji didn't know anything about Cheng Junze or what to prepare for going to the border. After thinking for a moment, he took out a small box from his own cage and handed it to Cheng Junze, saying, "If you're out there and it's still cold today, these are some commonly used medicines prepared by my mother. You can take them with you for any unexpected needs. The purpose and usage are all written on them." Cheng Junze didn't expect Lu Hanji to give him this. Upon opening it, he saw that it was divided into small compartments and stored in porcelain bottles. The corresponding usage and purpose were written on paper and placed under the porcelain bottles. Seeing Cheng Junze's somewhat surprised appearance, Lu Hanji said, "My father has been away for many years, and we have also been traveling with our parents. Sometimes when we get sick outside, it's inconvenient to ask the doctor to boil medicine. My grandfather used to work at the Imperial Hospital, and when my mother talked about these things, he made commonly used medicine into pills. Although it may not be as effective as the decoction, the advantage lies in convenience." Upon hearing Lu Hanji's words, Cheng Junze nodded in agreement. The border was short of medicine, and if there was a war, he had to endure it. However, he didn't know if it was difficult to make this pill. If it could be made, it would be of great use to people who often travel far away. Of course, Cheng Junze doesn't have time to think too much about these things at the moment. Thanks to Lu Hanji, he took the medicine box. In the afternoon, the people of Ningguo Mansion escorted Cheng Junze to the door. Watching Cheng Junze's figure ride away on horseback, Cheng looked a bit disappointed and turned to Lu Hanzhi, saying, "Go back, Junze will come back well." Due to Cheng Junze's expedition, the atmosphere of the family banquet at night became much more subdued. Lu Hanzhi also met a cousin and two cousins mentioned in the morning, and they exchanged greetings, which can be considered as acquaintances. Song Qinggang was 17 years old, and it was very rare to pass the imperial examination at this age. He looked like a gentle and dignified young man. In terms of age, Song Qinggang was 1 year older than Lu Hanzhi. However, he called him Cheng Junze's cousin, and he was called Lu Hanzhi's sister. Law. Yi Rong, who was only 13 years old, looked thin and small, and spoke softly. After greeting Lu Hanzhi, she sat back in her seat and didn't talk much to others. What Lu Hanzhi paid more attention to was Guo Xinlian. When he heard her name in the morning, and now when he saw a real person, he couldn't help but exclaim that she was just like her name. Unlike Yi Rong's petite appearance, Guo Xinlian has a graceful figure and a tall stature. However, when looking at her face alone, she is completely gentle and charming, as if a weak willow in the wind is lovable. Lu Hanzhi saw her approaching and bowing to himself, saying, "I have seen my sister. Law before." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Integration. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 6 Integration. After learning about Guo Xinlian's identity from Cheng Junze, Lu Hanzhi returned a gift and said, "Cousin, you have a gift." After seeing each other, Mrs. Cheng ordered the banquet to be opened. Lu Hanzhi is a newlywed woman, and both of her mother-in-law are present. Naturally, she first serves the elders to eat. Without this, the family is already a generous family. Moreover, because Cheng Junze went on a military expedition just after his wedding, Mrs. Cheng and Cheng both feel sorry for Lu Hanzhi. Lu Hanzhi finished his meal and asked her to sit down and eat without worrying about these rules. Liang sat next to Zheng and said, "My mother and sister-in-law really love my eldest son and daughter-in-law. Look at this, in the future, I will also have to love my second and third daughters-in-law. They come to our house with their charming and favored daughters, serving us old ladies with empathy. Don't we also hope that they will love Jun Yao and others?" Mrs. Cheng doesn't feel that she needs to use any downward pressure on her daughter-in-law. Even her daughters-in-law, who have been separated from her, have never had a sparring experience. There is no way for granddaughters-in-law to establish rules. However, when it came to this, Mrs. Cheng casually asked, "Speaking of Erlang, has the wedding date been set for the Wang family? Erlang is not young either. It would be best to marry a new wife in this year." When it came to this, Liang's face didn't look that good anymore. However, when Mrs. Cheng picked it up, she couldn't be perfunctory and replied, "I just asked before. The Wang family said that the girl is still young and not in a hurry. Isn't this busy with the groom's wedding? Let's put this matter aside for now, and I'll ask tomorrow. It's natural that we should pay attention when we ask someone else's girl. Erlang calls you his mother. This is his final event, and you should give more dim sum." Old Lady Cheng knows that Liang's eldest son is not so fond of the old couple, but she is too old to have the energy to manage Erlang. If the eldest daughter goes to do it, she is afraid of causing a rift between the sisters-in-law. Fortunately, although Liang was a bit cautious, he was able to handle this matter with great care. The Liang family was not very happy. Although the Wang family was not of noble status, they were also families of officials. The girl's grandfather and father were both officials in the court. If Erlang married such a strong wife, he would not be able to surpass Sanlang in the future. Of course, the Liang family would prefer Sanlang to marry a wife with a good family background. However, although Sanlang is a young master of the Guogong mansion, the second wife cannot inherit the title, and Sanlang's education is not outstanding. It is not easy for her to marry a high family wife for her son. Even Erlang, who was the first one to make the decision, chose to marry with his fingertips. In this way, the Wang family now has a sense of unwillingness. The Liang family would not actively go for a run, and they just wish this marriage could not be achieved. Mrs. Cheng mentioned this matter and gently let it go. The younger generation was present, and she didn't want to embarrass her daughter-in-law in front of them. Returning to Cheng Yuan, it was almost dark and lights were lit both inside and outside. Biha greeted her and said, "Grandma is back." Lu Hanji sat down with the help of two big maids, then took a cup of water handed over and drank it before sighing, "It's not easy for this big family to blend in. The Lu family has been in official positions for several generations, but their ancestral home is Izhou. Although they have settled in the capital for many years, most of their relatives are still in Izhou and they don't get along very often. The Cheng family is different. I have seen so many close relatives today alone, not to mention the distant relatives in my hometown. As the eldest granddaughter of the Cheng family, Lu Han will inevitably have to deal with these people in the future." Biha took a handkerchief to wipe Lu Hanji's hands, but dared not take the words. He only mentioned the things that Lu Hanji had previously instructed. "I have inquired about the layout of the mansion. Our Cheng Yuan is to the east of the mansion, and the Xia pavilion that Grandma mentioned last night is to the west of the mansion. Going further west, there are Zhuyuan and Lanyuan. Lanyuan is where the three girls in the mansion live, and I heard that there are two cousin girls living in Zhuyuan. Guo Xinlian and Yi Rong live together in the bamboo garden, which Lu Hanji knew. However, he didn't expect Xia pavilion to be close to the bamboo garden. Bai he said so, and Lu Hanji's first thought was that the spring warbler was related to Guo Xinlian. I heard that the cousin of the Guo family grew up in the mansion since childhood and was also childhood sweetheart with the crown prince. In the early years, the Guo family wanted to betroth her to the crown prince, but later on, the Guo family was not as good as before, so I didn't mention this." Bai he carefully glanced at Lu Han and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. How could the marriage of her own daughter be so difficult? Previously, the Li family's young master was like that, and now the uncle is like this again. Bai he's implied meaning was heard by Lu Hanji, but compared to the rumors outside and Cheng Junze's words, she naturally believed in Cheng Junze and, for no other reason, entrusted the private treasury to her. Lu Hanji did not explain to Biha, but Biha showed some hesitation and said, "Grandma, there's something that I don't know if I should talk about. You and Bizao came from the Lu family with me. Apart from Yang's mother, the ones I trust the most are you. If you continue to keep it from me, won't I become blind in this mansion?" Lu Hanji trusted Bizao and Biha, but he could also understand that when they arrived at a new mansion, their identities changed and many people were added next to them. The two of them would have some concerns. She wanted to gradually subdue the people in Cheng Yuan and make good use of her own people. Yes. Bai Chao and Bai He were naturally loyal to Lu Hanji. However, the Ningguo mansion was different from the Lu family, and they were somewhat confused. With Lu Hanji's words, the two of them finally settled down. Bai He then continued, "I followed Grandma's advice and carefully inquired about the situation and layout of the mansion. The rest was fine. It was as if someone had deliberately told me about the affairs of the Guo family girl. I couldn't figure out who did it for a moment, and I couldn't be sure if it was an illusion, so I didn't dare to directly tell Grandma." Upon hearing Bai He's words, Lu Hanji felt lost in thought. "Last night we ran around there, it was clearly intentional to take her to see something. Now it seems that it is mostly this girl from the Guo family. Last night I specifically took her to see it, but I didn't see it. Today, I beat around the bush and told her about it through her maid. I just wanted to tell her that this girl from the Guo family poses a threat to her. I don't know if it's the girl from the Guo family who is so enthusiastic. Or, thinking of Liang specifically mentioning Guo Xinlian in the morning, it is not impossible for Liang to do so, but what is her intention? Grandmother, what should we do now? Do we still need to investigate?" Biha felt that something was wrong with this matter. Should we investigate? The master has just married over, and there are not many available people in this mansion. He is afraid that if we don't find anything to say, it will cause a lot of gossip. But if we don't investigate, the person who pushed this matter doesn't know what their thoughts are, and hiding in the dark always makes people uneasy. Although I don't get along well with the crown prince, I am willing to believe him in his character. As for the people behind this, since the crown prince is not in the mansion now, let's just ignore these small tricks and watch them for now. Lu Hanzhi thought for a moment, but didn't plan on doing anything now. Please pay attention and observe which people in Cheng Junze are available, and your own place must be slowly managed. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Lu Family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Lu family. The miscellaneous day has passed, and the next morning it should be the time for the three dynasties to return. The three dynasties were supposed to be accompanied by their newlywed husband, but Cheng Junze had no choice but to go on a military expedition as ordered by the emperor. Zheng carefully prepared the return gift and instructed Lu Hanzhi, "Today, I should have accompanied you back to your mother's house. However, the military situation is urgent and the emperor's order is in place. Please help to release the situation with your in-laws. When the prince returns, let him apologize. This is where the husband's responsibility lies. My daughter-in-law understands that the elders in the family are reasonable people and will not blame her for it." Lu Hanzhi would not blame Cheng Junze for leaving her alone at home, but Zheng's sincere instructions made Lu Hanzhi's heart warm. "Okay, mother knows you're a good child, go quickly." Zheng sure saw it was getting late and sent Lu Hanzhi out. She was also at the age of Lu Hanzhi and knew she was worried about her parents' hearts. Having only been married for 2 days, Lu Hanzhi felt that he had experienced more than usual in a year. "The thought of seeing my parents and loved ones soon made me feel a little excited, and this journey seemed to have come at once." The Lu family had people waiting in front of the door early in the morning. As soon as they entered, the Jiang family welcomed them and pulled Lu Hanzhi to look left and right. They couldn't help but blush in their eyes and said, "Damn it, it's round." Lu Hanzhi's arms stiffened as he was hugged by his mother, and he couldn't help but say, "Mother, my daughter is already married. Can you stop calling her by her nickname?" Standing next to him, Lu Minji chuckled with a puff. Seeing his younger sister looking at him, he quickly restrained himself and said, "Mom, it's a big celebration for my sister to come back. Let's go in and talk. A group of people standing here is really inappropriate." Jiang nodded repeatedly, took Lu Hanzhi's hand and walked inside, asking about her situation at the Cheng family. Lu Hanzhi spoke one by one and repeated Zheng's instructions. Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Jiang sighed and said, "That's the imperial decree, it's the responsibility of the son-in-law. No wonder he is. Hanzhi, you also need to understand him and not make him difficult." The Lu family has always been a civil servant, but they are well aware that generals protect their families and the country, which is why they have today's peaceful and prosperous era. Therefore, although they did not consider marrying the Duke of Ningguo in the past, they have always respected the Cheng family. "I know." Lu Hanzhi nodded and took note of the elders' instructions. Lu Hanzhi got married, which was naturally different from when she was in the boudoir. When Mrs. Lu saw her daughter-in-law looking at her daughter with a heavy gaze, she asked them to speak on their own. Jiang didn't know how much she wanted to say, but she resigned from her mother-in-law before taking Lu Hanzhi back to talk. Having asked about Lu Hanzhi's situation at the Cheng family in detail, and then grabbed Yang's mother and 2 maids to ask again, fearing that Lu Hanzhi would not report good news or bad news, Jiang finally believed that Lu Hanzhi was doing well at the Cheng family, and then the conversation changed, bringing up Li Mingho. Jiang is not talkative. The impact of Li Mingho's elopement was too negative. Even if the Cheng family treated Lu Hanzhi well, it could not offset the harm they had done to the Lu family and Lu Hanzhi in the past. Originally, the relationship between the Lu family and the Li family was quite good. At this point in the conflict it was considered good to have no contact at all. Seeing Zhang's sneer, Lu Hanji couldn't help but ask, didn't the Zhou family girl marry into the Li family? Jiang, who was angry with the Li family, glared at Lu Han and nodded at him, saying, what are you thinking? Li Mingho did this despicably, but the Li family is a scholarly family that follows the rules. Lu Hanji also realized that the Cheng family would come to their door to marry Lu Hanji. On the one hand, it was because the Zhou family's incident had hurt the face of the Cheng family. If they couldn't get married that day, the Cheng family, like the Lu family, would be laughed at for an unknown amount of time, but more importantly, because in this matter, both the Cheng and Lu families are victims, Cheng Junze and Lu Hanji are not at fault, and the Lu family is a pure and upright scholar family. Of course, the Lu family will agree, and so is it. Lu Hanji eventually learned the details from his cousin Lu Yaji. The Li family planned to keep the elopement between Li Mingho and Zhou Jingyun a secret. As Jiang said, the Li family is a well-behaved and scholarly family. Once a marriage is settled, it is settled, and the eldest son is not allowed to act recklessly. Even if the marriage between the Li and Lu families fails, the Li family blames their own son for not being successful and the Lu family for not showing mercy, but they still cannot accept Zhou Jingyun as their daughter-in-law, regardless of the family background of the Zhou family. The most important thing is that as the saying goes, the eloper is a concubine, and they have never married a woman who eloped with someone as their daughter-in-law. When Lu Yaji talked about this, he sighed for a moment and said, that Miss Zhou from the Zhou family is also pitiful. Because Li Mingho didn't even want the reserved reputation of a woman, but the Li family strictly adhered to the rules and refused to agree to marry her in. Lu Hanji choked on his cousin's words. The Zhou family girl was pitiful, but what about her? They fall in love with each other, that's their business. If the Li family wants to withdraw, would she be so shameless that she won't let go? Unfortunately, on the day of her wedding, she eloped with someone else. If it weren't for the Cheng family's request, she would marry into the Cheng family. What would she do? Faced with rumors and gossip from others, would you rather hide in your hometown or marry into the Li family while holding your nose, and endure for a lifetime watching your husband treat her nose, face? Lu Yaji also noticed that Lu Hanji's face was not good looking, and after realizing it later, he said, second sister, I didn't mean that. After all, you also have a good marriage now, don't you? If the second younger sister has a good marriage, she should go talk to them about whether it works. Han Shirk glared at Lu Ya. The eldest sister's words are confusing. The girl from the Zhou family is not a child, and she has to endure what she does. Lu Yaji didn't have any bad intentions, just a soft heart. That day, she was also worried about Lu Hanji's future. But when Lu Hanji successfully married into the Cheng family, the Cheng family treated him well. Although Cheng Junze went on a military expedition the day after his wedding, the Cheng family's return gift showed their importance to Lu Hanji. In this situation, Zhou Jingyun, who was obviously rejected by the Li family, was even more pitiful and unknowingly spoke for her. Being blocked by a word from his sister-in-law, Lu Yaji didn't get angry. He just chatted and said, I didn't mean that. Second sister, don't get angry. Lu Hanji was not angry with her, and he couldn't argue with his cousin for the sake of outsiders. He just smiled and said it was okay. Han breathed a sigh of relief when she saw that this matter had passed. She was a quick-witted person, and she always sided with Lu Han on this matter. However, both of them were sister-in-law, and even if the situation escalated, her mother-in-law had to talk about her. Seeing this, she changed the topic and said, speaking of which, third sister is almost engaged. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Thoughts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Thoughts, Sister-in-Law. Lu Ting, who was originally thinking about how to persuade, suddenly turned red when the topic shifted to herself. Lu Ting is 14 years old. Although she hasn't reached her hairpin yet, choosing a marriage is not a matter of 1 or 2 days. Moreover, after the marriage is settled, there are still a series of formalities to follow, and it's not too early to get married. When Han mentioned this, it was obvious that he already had an idea. Upon seeing this, Lu Hanzhi asked closely, "Which family is it?" "I remember Aunt Er asked her mother before, is it the Mu family?" "It's not just his family." Han nodded. Adults wouldn't take the initiative to say these words to their daughter, but they always had to find a way to let her know. The messenger, whether it's sister-in-law or sister, is always better spoken by their peers. Before Lu Hanzhi got married, Lu Ting's marriage was already mentioned. The Lu family had a total of 4 daughters in their generation. Lu Yaji was the legitimate heir of the second wife, Lu Hanzhi was the legitimate heir of the eldest wife, and Lu Ting and Lu Yen were both illegitimate heirs of the second wife. Auntie Yu is gentle and generous, and is also kind to the 2 illegitimate daughters in the family. Especially since Lu Ting's birth mother was Yu's dowry maid and she disappeared early, Lu Ting was raised by Yu's side, and her feelings naturally differed. For the sake of Lu Ting's marriage, Yu put in a lot of effort, and ultimately favored the Mu family. The Mu family has ancestral roots in Sangzhou, but has been settling in the capital for several years. The father of the Mu family's young master passed the imperial examination a few years ago and now works at the Taichung Temple. The Mu family's young master passed the imperial examination last year and is also considered to have a promising future. This kind of family is not particularly outstanding, but Lu Ting is a commoner after all, and overall, it is considered the most suitable one. Previously, when my second sister got married, someone from the Mu family also came. I had agreed with my second aunt that we would come to propose marriage next month. At this time, marriage was like this. The 2 families first talked to each other, and both sides were willing. Then, the man invited a matchmaker to come and propose marriage, which was considered polite. As the male partner, the Mu family has to take the initiative when discussing marriage matters, while the Lu family just had a wedding this month, so the proposal has to be pushed back a bit. When it comes to proposing a marriage, Lu Ting, who was already blushing, hung her head directly. She did not dare to look at her sister-in-law and other sisters, but she was reluctant to dodge. She wanted to hear about her life. However, the master of the Mu family is only a 6th-rank official, and the young master of the Mu family has not even passed the imperial examination. Lu Yen, who had not spoken for a long time, interjected. The eldest sister and the cousin of the uncle's family both married well, and Lu Yen was not very old and wanted to know what kind of family she would marry in the future. Growing up in the capital since childhood, Lu Yen realized that she was not ignorant. Not to mention marrying into the crown prince's wife like Lu Hanzhi, Lu Yaji's father-in-law was also a 3rd-rank official, and her eldest brother-in-law was already a juren at a young age. Looking at Lu Ting's marriage, one can think of her future. If she wants to marry such a family, Lu Yen feels a bit aggrieved. She only feels that her stepmother is saying good things, but she is deliberately suppressing them in secret. "4th sister, where did you hear all this?" Lu Yaji frowned slightly and said, "This sounds uncomfortable." Lu Yen pursed her lips. She dared not say that it was her biological mother who said it to her. She was already 12 years old and knew that these words should not be said to her. Her aunt specifically reminded her not to tell anyone else. Upon seeing this, Han guessed a bit and secretly thought to himself, Aunt Er is doing well in everything else, but she's too lenient. If it were to be said that Aunt Er treated the 2 illegitimate daughters quite well, Lu Yen was not raised by Yushi's side, and Aunt Er was also worried about everything. Even when Lu Yen was only 12 years old, Aunt Er was already considering her marriage. But what I said was that I almost said that Aunt Er was harsh on Lu Ting and wanted to marry her down. Lu Yen didn't dare to mention her aunt's words, but hesitated and said, "I heard what I said, but I'm just worried that 3rd sister will be wronged in the future." It's hard to explain for Han's family. Lu Ting and Lu Yan are illegitimate, and the Mu family is already considered good. It's also easy to marry into a wealthy family. No one in a wealthy family has two illegitimate or black sheep, but such a husband will have to be separated in the future. How can he compare to a promising young man like Mu Runyan? Fourth sister, stop talking. There's no reason for us to interrupt in a big marriage. Lu Ting saw that her sister-in-law and sister were both silent. She was older and followed her stepmother, seeing more things. Knowing that her stepmother had put a lot of effort into her consideration, she quickly pulled Lu Yan's sleeve and asked her to stop talking. There is no concubine in the long room, but Lu Hanzhi has also seen how the wives and concubines of other people get along. If we say that Aunt Air is truly virtuous, she did not deliberately suppress anyone in Uncle Air's current two-bedroom concubine. She had no one left first, and she raised her children well. Although she did not take care of Lu Ting and Lu Yan as illegitimate daughters, she did not mistreat anyone. Just because the Lu family does not compete with their illegitimate daughters, does not mean that other families will treat their legitimate and illegitimate daughters equally. Many families will be picky about illegitimate offspring. The Mu family's preference for Lu Ting is also more because she was raised by their second aunt. Lu Yan actually didn't dare to directly complain about her legitimate mother. No matter how unhappy she was, she knew that her life was in the hands of her legitimate mother. When she saw that Lu Ting didn't agree, she also closed her mouth. Lu Hanzhi sat down with the sisters for a while, only to find it boring, so he went back to look for the Jiang family. After spending half a day at his mother's house, the Jiang family couldn't bear it, so he had to send Lu Hanzhi back. After returning home, Lu Hanzhi's life at the Cheng family gradually got back on track. Although Lu Hanzhi is the wife of the crown prince, she is a junior. Now, the steward of the Cheng family is her mother-in-law Zheng, and her second aunt Liang helps manage some. Lu Hanzhi only follows Zheng to learn. Jiang also told Lu Hanzhi about this issue. She is a younger generation, and her mother-in-law is in her prime. She doesn't have to run to demand power at this time, which is annoying. It's better to learn from it calmly. She is the eldest daughter-in-law, and as long as she doesn't make mistakes, no daughter-in-law of the same generation can surpass her. Lu Hanzhi originally did not have such a strong sense of power, but lived in the inner courtyard. It was not easy to live without some power. After listening to his mother's analysis, Lu Hanzhi relaxed and gradually learned to accumulate experience. Lu Hanzhi doesn't take care of the house, and his life is much easier than that of Zheng and Liang. Apart from being a council member with Zheng every day, Lu Hanzhi doesn't go out much and just takes care of his own potted plants in the yard. Cheng Junze didn't have much time in the capital, and the courtyard was originally filled with flowers and trees planted together by the family. Before the wedding, he only moved some blooming flowers to add joy. But the dowry that Lu Hanzhi married, in addition to the dowry prepared according to tradition, also includes some potted plants, which are the ones in front of him. After watering the flowers and plants in the yard, Bai Chao turned around and saw Lu Hanzhi carefully taking care of the potted plant. He couldn't help but say, that precious orchid grandma couldn't see it, so she kept that strange-looking grass like a treasure. End of this chapter. Article 9. Xian. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Article 9. Xian. This is not the first time that Bai Chao has said this, and Lu Hanzhi is not angry either. He said, "Isn't that Lan Chao something you're looking at? Who else is looking at this grass besides me? Besides, what's the use of Lan Chao other than just looking at it? My grass is of great use. You don't even know what kind of grass grandma's baby is, go recruit her." Both Bai Chao and Bai He have been serving Lu Hanzhi since childhood, and their relationship is deeper than later. They dare to talk and laugh with their master. When it comes to the grass that Lu Hanzhi raised, it was still when he passed through Mingzhou on his way back to Beijing and saw a merchant ship selling it from overseas. Lu Hanzhi was very pleased to see it and bought it specifically to raise it. The two little maids didn't understand, and Lu Hanzhi didn't care either. She had been in this world for so many years, and she had long been accustomed to this time of life. However, when she could meet familiar vegetables and fruits in her past life, she couldn't say how happy she was at that time. She didn't find much here, only potatoes, tomatoes, and chili peppers. The merchants who brought them to Central Plains seemed to want to promote them, but the people of Central Plains didn't buy them. It's not surprising that it's already difficult to make people accept something they've never seen before. Lu Hanzhi doesn't have such lofty ideals, so he just wants to plant something for himself. When he misses his hometown, he satisfies his craving. As a little rich woman with land and a family, this is not a problem at all. Grandma, Miss Eyre has fainted. Go and take a look. Lu Hanzhi just picked off the old leaves and poured some water into the flower pot, and someone rushed over urgently. Upon hearing these words, Lu Hanzhi frowned slightly and said, "What's going on? Have you gone back to your mother and aunt?" The second girl was walking in the yard, and as the sun grew older, she fainted in a moment. The first lady and the second lady went to the Wang family today, but they haven't returned yet. The maidservants dare not go to find the old lady, so they have to come first to find the old lady to make the decision. It was Hong Xiang, the big maid next to the second girl Cheng Xian, who was born out of wedlock and usually didn't dare to make a name for herself in the mansion. The big maid next to her was also very careful in her work, even if she was anxious, she didn't dare to run directly to the old lady. Zhang and Liang went to the Wang family for the marriage of their second son Cheng Junze. The Wang family was somewhat unwilling to marry their daughter over and did not want to bear a bad reputation, so they relied on their daughter's young age to delay the marriage. The Wang family can drag it on, but the Cheng family cannot. Cheng Junze is already 18 years old, and if the marriage is dragged on any longer, it will be meaningless. Mrs. Cheng saw that the Liang family was not proactive, so she asked Cheng to come together and negotiate. Regarding the matter of the second room, Lu Hanzhi did not want to get involved, but he heard that someone had fainted, so he couldn't let it go and said, "Bai Chao, please send someone to invite a doctor, and Autumn Cicada will come with me to take a look." The relationship between the eldest wife of the Cheng family is relatively simple. In addition to the Zheng family, the Duke of Ningguo also has a concubine. She was originally a maid beside the Duke of Ningguo and was only raised after giving birth to the third daughter, Cheng Jin. She is usually like a transparent person, and Cheng Jin is mostly under the control of the Zheng family. Relatively speaking, the situation in the second room is much more complex. Cheng Erye's late wife, Zhou Shi, came from the Pingnan Marquis mansion. Zhou Jingyun, who was previously betrothed to Cheng Junze, was Zhou Shi's biological niece. When Zhou Shi gave birth, she had difficulty giving birth and barely survived, but struggled for more than half a year before leaving. Leaving a tiny child to be taken care of, Mrs. Cheng took the initiative to lift Zhou's dowry made to her aunt, making it easier to take care of the child, which was the birth mother of the second girl Cheng Xian, Aunt Song. Aunt Song was originally a maid of the Zhou family, and even after becoming an aunt, she remembered Zhou's kindness and took good care of Cheng Junze. When Cheng Erye continued to marry his current second wife, the Liang family, she didn't dare to ask for anything, and even had little contact with Cheng Junze. Aunt Song is honest, but Cheng Xian and Cheng Junye, who are about the same age, still make the Liang family very concerned. The mother and daughter's lives in the Cheng family are not easy, and Lu Hanzhi frowned slightly. Cheng Xian is only 16 years old, and she had already lost a lot of weight when she saw her before. She must have had some serious illness. When Lu Hanzhi arrived at Meiyuan, Cheng Xian had already woken up, but she looked very weak. When she saw Lu Hanzhi coming, she struggled to get up and said, "Why did Sister.in.law come?" "I'm fine, I just let the sun shake my eyes." "Are you really? Didn't I say I shouldn't tell anyone to disturb others?" Lu Hanzhi quickly laid her down and said, "Can't you tell us even after all this?" "I think Hongxiang did the right thing. It's because second sister is confused. There's nothing more important than health. Miss, you should listen to grandma's advice. If you damage your body, how can the maidservants live up to your aunt's orders? Hong Xiang saw Cheng Xian's pale face and didn't care if Cheng Xian would get angry, she just wiped her tears. Although Lu Hanzhi has not studied medicine, he has also gained some understanding due to the influence of his maternal grandfather and mother. Upon closer inspection of Cheng Xian's appearance, it was clear that she was hungry. However, even if Liang Shi didn't like this illegitimate woman, she wouldn't treat Cheng Xian harshly on this matter, would she? During his contemplation, the doctor also arrived. Lu Hanzhi watched as the doctor examined his pulse and prescribed a prescription before ordering the green grass to send the doctor out. After instructing him to decoct medicine here, Lu Hanzhi called out Hongxiang and asked, "You heard the doctor's words just now. To be honest with me, is this a lack of proper examples for second sister, or is she unwilling to eat?" Lu Hanzhi called her out, and Hongxiang guessed what Lu Hanzhi wanted to ask. She couldn't help but blush and said, "Miss, I'm hungry myself." From Hongxiang's words, Lu Hanzhi finally understood the cause and effect. Liang didn't like Aunt Song and Cheng Xian, but she didn't treat them unfairly in terms of food and clothing. Cheng Xian got married several years ago, and her fiancé Ae was the grandson of the Minister of War. Cheng Eryi is still only a fifth-rank official, and even the government has not separated his family. It is difficult for the second wife's children to be considered top-tier in marriage matters. Cheng Xian's ability to arrange a marriage with the Gong family can be considered a high priority. But if we say that the Liang family is good for Cheng Xian, it would be a joke. That Gong Shilang is the immediate superior of Cheng Eryi, and his grandson is even more avoided by others. Otherwise, it would not be Cheng Xian's turn. Cheng Xian's fiancé Gong Shinyun, is the eldest grandson of the Gong family and is now nearing the age of a weak crown. However, not to mention taking on the responsibility of revitalizing the family business, he has been spoiled by his grandparents since childhood and has been idle all day. He is a well-known playboy in the capital. Lu Hanzhi's return to Beijing with his parents has not been long, and he has heard of Gong Shinyun's fame. Today, he teased the flower girl on East Street. Tomorrow, he will be the guest of some flower queen. Who would be willing to marry his daughter to someone who loves her? Gong Shinyun didn't care about these things either. He hasn't married yet, and his family has all illegitimate sons and daughters. The Liang family has arranged this marriage for Cheng Xian, and Lady Cheng scolded her severely. However, she is Cheng Xian's legitimate mother, and the marriage is certain. Even Lady Cheng cannot change it. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Persuasion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Persuasion. Cheng Xian cried and eventually had to accept this fate. She was naturally gentle in nature, and all she could think of was to please her husband and his grandparents in the future. Therefore, it is said that Gong Shinyun likes slender and delicate women, so Cheng Xian has been dieting and losing weight. At the age of 15 or 16, it is the time for her to grow her body, and she cannot bear not eating. As she becomes thinner and weaker, she finally faints in front of today's eyes. Lu Hanzhi frowned as he listened. He had seen dieting and weight loss in his past life, including those who succeeded, those who gave up midway, and those who experienced physical and psychological problems due to excessive dieting. Lu Hanzhi looked at Cheng Xian like this, her body had already gone wrong. The doctor said that Cheng Xian's stomach had been damaged, and if it continued like this, not to mention growing her body, she would not be able to hold on anymore. Grandmother advised the girl. The servant begged Aunt Song to persuade the girl, but with the girl's words, Aunt Song only shed tears, but tacitly agreed to let the girl continue to go hungry. How can the girl's body withstand this? Hongxiang was really worried about Cheng Xian and also worried about herself. If the master had an accident, what good could the servants they served be? Lu Hanji originally intended to ask Cheng Xian's biological mother to persuade her. Although she was Cheng Xian's sister-in-law, Lu Hanji had only recently married her and had no relationship with her. There were some things that were difficult to say in depth. It's just that Hongxiang said so. Obviously, Aunt Song was convinced by Cheng Xian. Lu Hanji was not willing to talk too much to others, but she couldn't watch a blooming girl about her age wither like this. After all, she sighed and said, I'm trying to persuade second sister. If it doesn't work, I can only ask my grandmother to warn her. Hongxiang also knew that Lu Hanji had only been married to the Cheng family for a short time, so she didn't sit on the sidelines and was willing to persuade her master. She was already extremely grateful. Lu Hanji returns to the room again. Cheng Xian has been served by a servant girl to drink congee. Seeing Lu Hanji coming in, Cheng Xian asks the servant girl to step down and says to Lu Hanji, please bother my sister-in-law and worry so much about me. Is it my fault? You're wrong, but it's not like that. Lu Hanji shook his head and continued, seeing Cheng Xian looking up at her. Your mistake is not taking care of your body and making yourself like this. As for me, since you're my sister, it's only natural for me to come and see you. Cheng Xian saw the redness in her eyes and knew that she had told Lu Hanji everything. She felt a little uneasy and embarrassed, and said, sister-in-law doesn't need to do this when she meets someone as good as big brother. But what can I do? Lu Hanji sighed. At this time, the 3 obediences and 4 virtues were too harmful to women, but more importantly, they were created by the times, especially for the women of wealthy families who had never shown their faces to work outside. Therefore, facing such a situation, there was no other way but to accept it. Lu Hanji was fortunate to have been born by his parents who cherish his daughter, and he could understand Cheng Xian's reasons for doing so. However, second sister, I'm not saying that you shouldn't fight for yourself, but that he likes thin things today, and you can still starve and reduce your body. What if he likes short things in the future? Do you want to cut off your own legs? Cheng Xian was so surprised that she opened her mouth slightly, but couldn't help but shed tears. She had also heard that Gong Xinyun had a fondness for plump beauties 2 years ago. He was not a good-looking person, and it was not surprising that he would like different beauties in the future. But what should she do? She wants to spend her whole life with him. Second younger sister, you married to be a legitimate wife, not to be a spoiled concubine. Lu Hanji sighed. After this marriage was settled, even Mrs. Cheng and Mrs. Zheng could not change it. Their parents were present, and they were all willing to marry. No one else opposed this marriage. As a younger generation, Lu Hanji couldn't do anything more. In this situation, we can only find a way to make Cheng Xian live better in the Gong family in the future. Lu Hanji's relationship with Cheng Xian is not as good as that, and they cannot speak to her from the bottom of their hearts, so they can only wake her up in this way. After the marriage was settled, my grandmother also said similar things to her, but she also saw many people who had a legitimate wife status, but lived even worse than a concubine. She was only 16 years old, should she just live like this for a lifetime? Lu Hanji saw it, but he really didn't know how to persuade her about it. When the news of Li Mingho's elopement came, Lu Hanji thought of the worst-case scenario. If the Lu family values their relationship with the Li family more and insists on marrying her to the Li family, then all she can do is to please her in-laws and stand firm in her mother-in-law's position. After overcoming her in-laws in the future, it will be time for her to become the head of the family. Having considered the most pessimistic future, Lu Hanji can also understand Cheng Xian's current mentality, that they can live a harmonious and good life together. Who would want to empty the title of legitimate wife? Second sister, people's physique and appearance are innate. I didn't know you well before, but I've seen you a few times before, and I never thought you were fat. This Lu Hanji didn't lie, but Cheng Xian followed the Cheng family. She was tall, but unlike Guo Xinlian, she had a kind of graceful figure that didn't match her thinness. There are various flowers in the world. Do we still have to distinguish between high and low, and people are the same? Today you think I'm so beautiful, and tomorrow others think second sister is so beautiful. Why should second sister throw away her own advantages and compare herself to others? Subconsciously, Cheng Xian looked up at Lu Hanzhi, feeling that regardless of how others looked at her, the sister-in-law in front of her was all good-looking. However, if someone thought she was good-looking, Cheng Xian felt a bit insecure. But Lu Hanzhi continued, not to mention beautiful skin bags are easy to find, but beautiful women tend to age. Only with good temperament and cultivation can they last for a long time. The second younger sister, instead of pursuing details, should learn more things. The saying goes, there is a poetic and scholarly aura in the belly, which is the truth. Thinking of Cheng Junze who married into the Eastern Palace, she was not the most beautiful of the Cheng family's sisters, but she had a sense of dignity and elegance. She was also somewhat convinced by Lu Hanzhi's words. She asked, "What should I learn?" The Cheng family also invited a teacher to teach their daughters. Regardless of their marital status, the Cheng family's daughters have to go to school and study at their age. Although Liang had never done anything in public, he often instructed Cheng Xian to copy scriptures or do needlework in private. Cheng Xian dared not refuse, as it inevitably delayed her studies. Women cannot take the imperial examination. The Cheng family will arrange their daughter's homework, but they will not force her to become a talented woman. Cheng Xian studied it all, but only managed to barely meet people. End of this chapter.